April 7th, 2026. Well, I'm going to address some interesting issues in this one. Um, like I said, we're all kind of holding our breath for what's going to come tomorrow on the Iran situation. However, in my last video, I pretty well covered it, and nothing a whole lot has changed in terms of what will be coming um, as if the ultimatum is not answered. And as of the last report, it hasn't been. And um, so I might discuss this a little bit more at the end of this, but the main thrust of this, and of course, the video is about something else, which is a little bit more interesting and mundane, and that's the bizarre story of Bob Lazar. His the new movie S4 is out, in which it gives us a visual presentation of the Bob Lazar story, which we've heard before. And I think this is largely consistent, I think, with what he said previously. There may be some new nuances I kind of picked up that maybe I didn't quite catch before. But all in all, it falls in the same situation. And so I want to kind of get into that a little bit and see what we can do. I mean, the thing about Lazar is that, well, his story has certain problems, which are, well, for one thing, his academic background claims, which apparently is yet to actually admit are false, which is interesting, even in this movie. Meanwhile, George Knapp seems to be implying that pretty strongly in his part in the movie. He appears there too, and of course, he's the journalist that brought him to world fame, as you know. So. But his claims of having gone to MIT when in fact he was probably at some junior college at the same time, and nobody at MIT has ever heard of him, I don't think, except for his post '89 publicity about the S4 subject, if you will, and nor has anybody at Caltech heard of him much either. So. And also after he would have been going to junior college, he apparently still has time to fit in some time at Fairchild, and then he ends up at Los Alamos working for Kirkmeyer, a contractor or a headhunter, job shopper type, I guess that's the right word for it, a company, which I've run into in my past. Never been a job shopper, but at any rate, I've known some. And so anyhow, anyhow, he worked at Kirkmeyer at Los Alamos in the physics department there. Although to say he was a physicist, probably a technician in the physics department working with their equipment in some way. He's a skilled technician. He's a good hands-on guy with equipment. I think at some level, yeah. But the details are murky, and you have the mixture of the acknowledgments he was there. It's in the phone book, and then they denied it, and you know what I mean. He was there. Okay, I don't think anybody seriously thinks he wasn't at Los Alamos. Then he had an interim period where his security clearance would have lapsed, I think, and he'd engaged in a variety of interesting, fun activities. And then somehow in late '88, he ends up being brought in through EG&G and into allegedly Area 51. Now, there's some people make certain other controversies about it, but they're known for working in a lot of very highly classified and sensitive areas, as you know, and supposedly he there was brought into S4. Given a day of briefings on an overview of a variety of programs there, and then after that they show him coming in and he gets to see the saucer, and supposedly there's like 9 bays there where they have different objects, and he's able to see. I guess he mentions 2 other vehicles, one which had a hole in the side of it. And the other one looked like some kind of weird blob thing. I don't know what else they had there. I guess he probably never got down that far because the whole thing was so compartmentalized, so supposedly. And probably is. I mean, there is some evidence presented in there based on some satellite photography that suggests that there really is such a facility there. And again, it was one of those kind of things where Knapp got some confirmation of that. And after all, if you were having a place to do some studies and reverse engineering on UAPs, wouldn't that be a good place to do it? Someplace kind of located inside the complex, but a little bit further away from it, so the people working more or less on probably airplane type projects and drones wouldn't necessarily directly get involved in it, you know, possibly. I mean, they, have buses with the windows out and all that stuff. And he shows how they have that weird device that you put your hands in, and it uses the patterns of your bones and your fingers to determine whether you're legit or not. Plus, he's issued his badge and with this MAJ on it, which sounds very similar actually to the thing that got Admiral Wilson, if you go through that story. So anyhow, the thing about this whole thing is there's some elements which seem to be true and some elements that seem to be false or nonsense. And so it gets very tricky. So, by the way, if you like these videos, please give me a like, subscribe, click the bell for notifications, and you can also follow me on Rumble. Yeah, okay, let's get into it's kind of interesting about this subject. There is the evidence that suggests he's there is interesting because, for one thing, he did have a W-2 form, which gives his pay stub, and the employer number on it, when people tried to check it out, apparently referred to a classified organization. And apparently the people, when they asked the second time, were told, don't ask this again or else you're barking up a tree that uncleared people should not pass. Sweetman, who's a guy who's does a lot of studies of aeronautical programs and tries to Bill Sweetman, I guess, back in the day, when he was sometime around, I think it was called back to active duty around 9/11. The copies of this thing were apparently present. So he goes into the supposedly, by the way, he was working for an interesting, mysterious group that otherwise is not acknowledged, known as the Department of Naval Intelligence, DNI. But as far as we know, there is no DNI. There is an ONI, Office of Naval Intelligence. So Sweetman took the copy of this W-2 to the Admiral, Office of the Admiral in charge of the ONI and the Pentagon, because he'd been assigned to the Pentagon. He was recalled to active duty, apparently. He was in the reserves, kind of a top sergeant guy. And anyhow, he goes in and talks to an aide, and the aide looks at it and actually takes it into the Admiral. And I think he was expecting to be told, the Admiral's busy, go away. Instead, he was told to come in to see the Admiral. The Admiral basically gave him a major dressing down. So, Sergeant, don't you ever come in here with anything like this again. Takes the thing and puts it in the shredder and then says, get out of here. Which isn't what you'd think would happen if it was a completely fake document, right? Apparently, he was able to recognize what it was. Interesting. So I don't know what the relationship between the ONI and the DNI is, but one of which exists officially, and the other one and been around a long time, and the other one we don't know about. But suppose that's who Lazar was being paid by, doing this work on the reverse engineering effort on the saucer, right? So that's kind of a mark in favor of the truth aspect of it. And it seems like he's sort of familiar with what goes on in there. And, well, of course, he probably heard it from people that he knew that had worked there, the general lay of the land. I mean, I've heard some of this, and I've never been anywhere close to it. I've never been in Nevada. I've flown over it, but I've never been in it. So anyhow, so what I'm getting at is, well, okay, you got that. But then when I look at what he's describing in here, which is now graphic and not, easier to follow, I guess, he shows this reactor they have and how they put in the mysterious element 115 that's stable, and we're just holding it, I mean, the real element 115, if you had a piece that big, you wouldn't want to be holding it because it'd be highly radioactive. It'd probably be a lethal dose just holding it for an instant as it disintegrates. Probably blow up, actually, if you had that much. But he says it's stable. Okay. And they put it in there, and then the thing has a gravitationally repulsive force, and then it, and all that, and they can any rate, and they can turn it on or off by rotating one of these things, which is supposed to be the transmitters of this wave, and all that, which they allegedly had cut out of the saucer. However, later on, he goes into the saucer, and all three units are in there, and the reactor's in there too. So that seems to me a bit of a contradiction. Maybe they cut it out of a different one of the saucers they had there. They didn't say that. To me, that looked like a bit of a contradiction. But by and large, I would say, just looking at what's being described there, if that's the reverse engineering program, and if that's the personnel working on it, I can see why they're not making much progress, per Admiral Wilson's, findings. It didn't seem to be very. I mean, it didn't seem like this was getting very far at all, which is like what I predicted would be the case. But what are they doing then? Who knows? A small group of people, some of whom, at least in his case, probably not really highly qualified, and supposedly allegedly he's told some stories what they'd learned previously, where they'd X-rayed the device, the reactor device, and thought it had a cyclotron inside of it. Okay, I don't know. Okay, and he describes how these gravity wave generators work and all that stuff, and although again they said they cut it out, yet all three are there. That's strange. He also describes a case where they actually flew one, but he doesn't know how they flew it or how they were able to communicate with a pilot. Or was a pilot one of those psionic assets we've talked about previously? I don't know. But anyhow, he claims he saw the thing fly and was able to walk under it and see how it seemed to disappear when he's under it because of the way that the gravitational effects were bending light. And then he walked back out and it became visible again. And it seemed like, so assuming that this all happened, I'm still skeptical about this. The details of what he describes doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But there is the idea that I still have kind of heard about. I think somebody have thrown this out, that this could be a disinformation campaign, not by Bob Lazar, but by the people controlling the program. And the idea was to get a guy who was fairly unreliable, if you will, bring him in there, carefully escort so he didn't see anything they didn't want him to see, let him see and read what they wanted him to read, feed him the information they want him to be fed, probably about that element 115, which hadn't been created at that time. They were far away from it at the time of 1989. And then count on him going out and essentially being kicked out and blabbing to the world, which he has. And that might set certain adversaries, then the Soviets, now the Russians, on the wrong direction, spending a lot of effort trying to synthesize 115, hoping that would help them. And, well, obviously it was just a highly radioactive, unstable substance when they found it. So at any rate, that's kind of my take on it. But at any rate, it's out there. I thought I'd give it a watch and see what it is. It's a well-made production for what it is. A lot of questions keep not being asked that should be. I mean, it's like Knapp doesn't want to offend him, so he doesn't want to point out too much about he kind of thinks the guy's unreliability of his educational background probably makes him easier to unacknowledge when the time comes. So, I don't know. In conclusion, I would say I would pay a lot more attention to what David Grush has to say and some of these other people. And this, I don't know what to make of it, but I hope he got a piece of the money that they're going to make on this thing, because after all, he's been through a lot. Whatever, he gets a little bit of publicity there. I don't know. Maybe it's absolutely true, but if that's how they work, it's totally contradictory to what other people have said, such as James Lukatsky, who allegedly seen another object, perhaps at a different location, probably different technology, maybe a different type of alien. Who knows? That's sort of the situation. Anyway, I just thought I'd run through my one other thing I want to mention about the DNI. Another researcher named John Stewart, who got a videotape that allegedly had been smuggled out of Area 51, in which a extraterrestrial had been apparently captured and was being interrogated by psionic assets, and a doctor was trying to deal with the aliens' respiratory problems. But at any rate, that's been out there and has been, so far, I don't guess it's been able to be completely debunked yet in terms of it being a fake. And there's a case to be made that, well, it would be kind of hard to fake it at that time that good, and that's a discussion. But at any rate, the key thing I'm getting to is on the video that the date I think was 1991, and it says DNI, and then it has this date on it, which is another reference to this mysterious Department of Naval Intelligence, which we've officially never been heard of. And apparently any mention of it leads to an emotional reaction by the head of the ONI. So I don't know. It's a good question. I just thought I'd mention that too while we're putting it all together. So that's what I know about the subject. I think it still is mysterious and bizarre. And like I'd say, I'd rely more on David Grush and some of those people, Lou Elizondo, I think, than this case. I don't know what they actually think about Lazar, actually. In fact, I never heard Grush discuss him, actually. So anyway, that's what I have on that subject. But I will briefly mention before I quit here that I guess as of this recording, within a day, we're supposed to launch this massive offensive against Iran to destroy their electrical infrastructure and other targets, to reduce them to a pre-industrial status, at least, so that they won't be able to rebuild their weapons and manufacturing. So we'll see if that actually goes forward. Actually, there's a little bit of evidence, the stuff I saw today, that this may be beginning. Maybe they're just ramping it up slowly. Attack on a petrochemical plant, and there was apparently a B-2 strike on an underground bunker where they were all meeting again. So with a massive ordnance penetrator. So at any rate, so that's at any rate, there's no safe place to meet around there, I guess. Especially now if they're going to drop one of those 30,000-pound specials on you, or maybe two of them. At any rate, so that's kind of how that went, and so we'll see how that goes. I guess we do have to make a brief mention to commend the heroic and rescue of the weapons system officer of the F-15. There's a lot more material on that in the media, so they go into all the details. So I'm not going to spend time on it here. It's a really thumbs up heroic story for the U.S. military. A very expensive rescue, and one that could have been highly costly if it hadn't gone perfectly, well, not perfectly right, but went relatively right. I mean, in terms of equipment, it was a bit of a disaster. In terms of personnel, it was a big success. Let's put it that way. I don't think we can afford doing too many of these. But on the other hand, I guess some new orders for C-130s could be coming in, I don't know, and helicopters. So at any rate, so that's that. As always, we post this on YouTube and Rumble, and the addresses of my social media accounts are in the description below. So all for this time.